everybody, my name is Dexter, and man, today was just a crazy, crazy, crazy day, and I will tell all of you guys about it right now. And yeah, I mean, today I actually went to Chicago, just to escape from school and all that stuff. But I think, as I got to school this morning, I actually learned, that Ferris Bueller, was sick, and all that stuff. And even though I'm not as popular as Ferris, you know, and all that stuff, I just wanted to do as much as I can, to make sure that to pay money to get him like a new kidney and all that stuff, And little thing about myself, I actually live in the same neighborhood as Ferris, actually. And so anyway, my school day basically started, I was going like to the bus stop and all that stuff, and I was going to the bus, and so anyways, as I was going to the bus, I was overhearing, Ferris's parents, and they like noticed that he was sick, and all that stuff, and I heard the whole conversation with, and Ferris like wanted to go to school and all that stuff, and then Jeannie was also in the conversation and all that stuff, and unfortunately she was not acting very nice and all that jazz, and so anyways, as I overheard the conversation, then I saw Ferris's parents driving to work, then I saw Jeannie driving to school, and unfortunately, I was in the conversation, I was, overhearing the conversation so much that I think Jeannie even flipped me off, and that's how mad, that she was, and so anyways, then I was going to the bus stop and all that stuff, and just heading to school, and anyways, and so then what happened was, as I got to school, I was hanging out with my other friends and all that stuff, and they were saying like, "Hey, Dexter, do you have any fun plans, for the weekend and all that stuff?" And I was like, sorry guys, I don't know if I do have any plans during the weekend and all, And so then, I went to my first class, and there was this one teacher that, had black hair and glasses and all that stuff, and he was just taking attendance, and he kept saying Bueller, 12 times and all that stuff, and then I kept shaking my head, going like, just going like that, being like, I don't see Ferris anywhere, sir, and so then he started repeating the words fry 30 times, and all that jazz, and then little did I know, while I was at school, Ferris actually was not sick. He actually was okay, and he actually faked being, sick and all that jazz. And so, and the reason I mainly found that out is mainly because, I overheard, another friend of his, talking on one of those, pay phones and all that stuff, and they were like talking, and then one of his friends was saying like, "Well, dude, how bad is the situation?" And so he sounded pretty normal, on the payphone. But I just wanted to get in on the gag on it, and I thought it was pretty funny and pretty funny that he skipped school and all that stuff. I thought it was pretty funny. And so anyway, then what happened, was during lunch, as I was eating lunch, I was like eating my sandwich, and as I was eating lunch, I heard Mr. Rooney and Miss Grace, if you will, unfortunately I can never really know her name, what her last name is, but and so anyways, and so Mr. Rooney was like talking to Ferris's mom and all that stuff, and saying that he was absent 9 times, and actually it's actually true. But what happened was, I heard from one student that Mr. Rooney's computer, got hacked, and so it went from 9 times to 2 times, which was pretty funny. And so then it was pretty funny, and so then what happened was I ran into Mr. Rooney, and he was not looking he didn't look very nice, he was kind of mad, because of what happened, and then he went to me and was like, "Yeah, what do you want?" And I was like, "Oh, hi, Mr. Rooney, how's your day going?" and he's going like, it's going F word terrible, you know. And I was like, oh, that's too bad, you know. Hey, and I was like, hey, how's my graduation rate going? And so anyway, then what happened was he then yelled at me, was like, get out of my face, you know. And so then what happened was I was like, okay, I'll get out of your face, sir. And so anyways, then what happened was then one of the lunch ladies came up to me and he was like, hey, Dexter, hey, you tried to scold me. And Mr. Rooney was like, what? And then he was like, he no pay for his lunch money. And I'm like, oh boy. And so then what happened was that, you know, then Mr. Rooney ended up, you know, chasing me like around the school and all that stuff. And so then what happened was I was like running around, you know, the school and jumping from lunch table to lunch table. And then I ended up on the stage, and then I ran through a door and then ran, you know, jumped off one of those metal benches, and then unfortunately he was going like, hey, come back here, hey, you know. And so then I went on a motorcycle, and so then I started, you know, on the motorcycle going room, 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 and so I was going like, yahoo! And so what happened was Mr. Rooney, you know, saw me on the motorcycle and all that stuff, and it was just really, really crazy, you know. And I started heading to Chicago, and you know, and I was just on, and it was just a crazy ride, and so that's why, you know, my hair is just looks all crazy and messed up, you know, and all that stuff, you know, and also from the fact that I also really like to dance, you know, a lot, and so. Anyways, you know, so anyway, I got to Chicago, you know, and I found a place to put my motorcycle, you know, but the next clip will get even more crazier. And then also, like, another thing, you know, to add is that, you know, before, you know, I did all those crazy things, you know, like Mr. Rooney chasing me, you know, I then, you know, back before, after my first class, I then went back to Ferris's house, and I noticed Ferris, you know, messing around, and he then was playing his clarinet, and then he was on the piano, then he was drawing on his computer, and then all of a sudden he was, you know, outside in a bathing suit, and he was, I believe he might have been talking, you know, to Cameron Fry, you know, I believe, you know, and he was talking to him like on the phone and all that stuff, and I mean, I didn't know like what they were going to be doing, and all that, you know, but then, you know, little did I know, you know, while I was in Chicago, you know, messing around, you know, I ran into this Italian-looking fellow, you know, and he had long hair and a mustache, and unfortunately he was like, hey, man, you know, come over here, you know, I'll take very good care of your motorcycle, man. And so then after he did that, then there was this one African-American person that was like his partner in crime and all that stuff. And so anyway, they then took my motorcycle and then they like took it for a spin, you know, and they were going like really fast and all that jazz. And so anyways, you know, I started, you know, walking around, you know, Chicago and all that stuff, and you know, and seeing like all the fun things, and you know, I even went into the world's tallest building, and then I went into like a mall that was in Chicago, I believe, and then and so yeah, I mean, it was just, you know, it was just really crazy, you know, it was just very, very fun, you know, but you know, and then also, you know, back around Ferris's house, you know, then Ferris, you know, he you know, then they started Ferris and Cameron, they went to go get the 1960s Ferrari. I believe that was Cameron's dad's car, and they started, you know, going to get the car, and then they went back to Ferris's house, you know, and I also saw this as well, you know, they started crank calling Mr. Rooney on the phone, and this was like after, you know, Mr. Rooney, you know, was chasing me, and you know, and all that stuff, you know, and and so anyway, a lot of people found out what was going on and all that stuff, and then of course Grace said, Ferris Bueller was online too and all that jazz, and then Mr. Rooney was trash talking, to Cameron on the phone, and Cameron was pretending to be Sloane Peterson's dad and all that stuff, and actually a little bit of a fun fact. I actually have a class with Sloane Peterson. Actually, I had that exact same class that she did. And especially with the teacher that was saying something about prisons and symbolizing, and so anyways, but unfortunately, then the teacher was looking, going like, "Where does anybody know like where Dexter is? Does anybody know where he went?" And so, unfortunately, at that school, nobody really knew who I was, and they were like, "You mean the kid that has the New York Cosmos T-shirt?" And so then he was like, "Yes, the kid that has the New York Cosmos T-shirt on." And then one teenage girl was going like, "I don't know why he's wearing a New York Cosmos T-shirt. His Giants suck. And who likes soccer? Nobody likes soccer in this country, And unfortunately, snooty and snotty rich girl said that, and then and so anyways, then there's this one guy that's saying like, man, I don't understand soccer. I don't understand it at all. Why can't that kid just be a Cubs fan and play baseball, or football, I mean, why does he like the New York Cosmos? And I can't stand that he likes the Yankees, I mean, the Cubs are better, anyways, and so, anyways, then, of course, the nurse called Sloane Peterson, and then they also made up a story how Sloane Peterson's grandma passed away, even though that was not true, and then all of a sudden, they went to go get Sloane Peterson out of her class, and at that time, I was nowhere around school, and so basically, in some sort of way, I kind of beat Ferris Bueller to Chicago, but I didn't go to the exact locations, that him, Cameron, and Sloane went to, And in fact, quite the contrary. I actually went to more places, actually, but I'll tell you guys more about it in the next clip. So anyway, the first place that I went to in Chicago, I actually went into this one restaurant, that it kind of looked like a Chicago pizza place, I believe. And the main reason, I went there was, well, first of all, I was kind of hungry, and I didn't really eat that much lunch at school. Luckily, though, I had, $200 in my pocket, and so I was able to spend some of it on, I think, on 15 slices of pizza. And so then what happened was, little did I know, I actually saw Mr. Rooney go into that same restaurant, and he had like those, those aviator sunglasses, and then they flipped, I think, and so he went in there. And then I also saw this one beautiful girl, she started playing like an arcade and all that stuff. And so, anyways, then she started, going in there, and and then Mr. Rooney went in there as well. And at first I didn't know if I needed to hide or not. I probably should have hided, but then Mr. Rooney, started talking to that one girl, and little did Mr. Rooney know, I think he kind of thought, the girl kind of looked like Ferris in a sense, but sadly it was not, and little did she know, but little did that, and so what happened was, she ended up, taking a straw and spitting a bunch of Pepsi into Mr. Rooney's face, and all that stuff. And also, too, she actually sat with me, actually. I actually got to know her, and all that stuff. And I actually found out that her name was, oh man, I can't really remember her name. But I think her name was name, Anna, I believe. And anyway, she sat with me, and we started talking and all that stuff. And actually, I found out that she was actually a college girl and all that stuff. And she really liked how my hair was, and she kind of really liked how like my eyes, and she also liked my muscles as well, and all that stuff. And little did I know, this was like the first girl that I met that did not know Ferris Bueller, actually. And so anyway, like we started talking, as Mr. Rooney left, and then we went to other places. I was going to her to other places as well, and I think I went with her like to the mall, I believe, and then we went to like a couple stores as well, and then we went to this other, Italian restaurant. It wasn't the same Italian restaurant that Ferris, Cameron, and Sloan went to, but it was just as fancy. And unfortunately, and just like Ferris, I did run into another snotty manager as well. But unfortunately, it didn't really end very well the way it did with Ferris, and how it went with me was that, the snooty manager, didn't like the fact that I was wearing a t-shirt to a fancy environment, and so what happened was, and so he ordered me to leave a couple times, but then what happened was then he was going to like his office to like get some papers and all that stuff, and so then what happened was then it was then actually I did get kicked out of the restaurant, and so that one girl that was playing the arcade, me and her were climbing up the ropes to get on top. There was this one construction worker that was able to help us. And so then what happened, was then the same owner saw us and was like, "Hey, you're not supposed to be here." And so then what happened was he looked outside, and so then he stepped on, one of those construction platforms that construction workers use. And so he stepped on it, and then he started falling down, and he stepped on it, he was going like, "Ah!" And so he fell down, and then he fell into like a pile of flowers or something, and he got like a bunch of dirt on his suit and all that stuff. And so, and he had a bunch of dirt on him, and so then he lost his wallet, and so then, and then but then unfortunately, then what ended up happening was there was these people in black suits, and they had, they looked like, agents or something. They even had like sunglasses or something, anyways, they were going like, this kid Dexter is causing a crime. We have to go follow him. And so then they started going into the Italian restaurant, and all that stuff. And little did we know, Anna and we then snuck into that restaurant. We had a very, 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 very good time. It was very, very wonderful. And I think she ended up being my girlfriend as well, which was really nice. And so anyways, and so I found out from other sources, from other people, that Ferris was in Chicago as well, and having a lot of fun, and he was with Cameron and Sloan, and they even went to like the Chicago stock market building, I believe, and then they went to the Chicago Art Museum, even though I don't know if that's the same name or if that's what it's called or something like that. But anyways, then Anna actually took me to that same Chicago Cubs game that Ferris, Cameron, and Sloan went to. And I actually saw them, saying, a lot of baseball words and all that stuff, and talking about gym class, And so they were like doing all that jazz, and so Anna and I were sitting down, and then we ended up being on the kiss cam as well, and so Anna was able to give me like a big French kiss as well on the cameras. But then unfortunately, what happened was that, was Mr. Rooney was still in that restaurant, and so then he saw me, on the kiss cam, and all that stuff, and unfortunately though, Ferris never really got to see me kissing Anna on the lips. I mean, Ferris, Cameron, and Sloan, they were like pretty much gone at that point in time. But anyways, we stayed throughout the whole game, and I think we left around like 4 or something like that. It might have been around 4. And then also too, Anna and me, we actually took a taxi, as well. I mean, and little did we know, we were actually 3 cars, behind Ferris's taxi as well. And we also went to that same museum, and we went into that same museum, and we were kind of in like different places than Ferris, Cameron, and Sloan were. But I had just as good a time as they did. But unfortunately, as they left, the same people that were in the black suits, started following. They even had like all my identification and all that stuff, and they even said like, "This is Dexter. I think he could be armed and dangerous." And so they kept on like following me. And I didn't even know who they were or anything. And Anna was distracting me, throughout the whole thing, and yeah, it was just like crazy and all that stuff. But then finally, we were able to get to the parade, and I will talk about the parade in the next clip. But anyway, then as, there was like some sort of, German, parade, that was like starting in downtown Chicago and all that stuff. And so Anna and we went there as well. I don't know where we sat, but like we were at the parade, and I was sitting down with Anna and all that stuff. And then I also saw, Cameron and Sloan, walking, in Chicago. I mean, I don't know what exactly, what exactly they were talking about. But then what happened was, all of a sudden I saw Ferris on the float, and he was like singing, I believe. He was like singing with the German girls, I believe, and so he was like singing and going crazy, and then he was singing Twist and Shout, and everybody was like dancing and all that stuff. And I mean, it was a good time, man. I had a really wonderful time, and I was dancing with Anna, during, the parade and all that stuff. I was dancing with her, and, I was like dancing, with Anna, and, dancing to Twist and Shout, and then everybody else in the parade was dancing, and then there was some Wall Street people that were dancing. Then there was an African American crowd that was dancing. Then there was a construction worker that was dancing, and then even Cameron and Sloan were dancing, as well. I mean, it was just a wild time, with Ferris dancing and all that stuff, and yeah, I mean, it was and yeah, it was crazy, But out of all that fun that was going on, I actually found out from another source, that Jenny or Jeannie got back home, and she actually found out that that Ferris was lying, that he wasn't sick and all that jazz. And so anyway, then Mr. Rooney, came to the house as well, and he came to the house, and Ferris set up a bunch of traps for him, and all that stuff, and with a recording device. And then I also found out, the same people that proposingly, wrecked my motorcycle also kind of destroyed the mile manometer or whatever, and so like the mile circle thingy, that you see in cars, and so they were starting going really fast on the Ferrari, and then on my motorcycle as well, and then it was funny because then like Mr. Rooney ended up, getting his foot stuck in the mud, and then he got chased by Ferris's Rottweiler, and it was just very, very wild. And so and then as it got to like 4 o'clock or 4:50, or I believe, then I believe, Anna started driving me back, she started driving me back to my neighborhood and all that stuff. But then little did I know, she actually lived in a dorm, in an apartment that was kind of by, I think it was by Cameron's house, I believe. Actually, no, it was not an apartment. It was actually a house. She actually lived next door to Cameron. And so, anyways, it was really fun. I got to, I was with her a lot, and then I actually found out that Ferris, Cameron, and Sloan were next door, and unfortunately, Cameron was just not doing very well. Like he was just like his face was all frozen up, and then he fell into the swimming pool, and then Ferris had to save him, and then Ferris threw Sloan into the swimming pool as well, and so then what happened was then Jenny, or Jeannie, she ended up, finding Mr. Rooney, and she ended up kicking him in the face 3 times, and then she screamed, went into her room, and then there was this one very beautiful and stunning nurse, that was very beautifully formed, that went onto Ferris's property, and she brought like a lot of flowers and all that stuff, and then like Jeannie ended up slamming the door on her, and so yeah, and so then what happened, was that Cameron got so mad at how his life has been turning out, and all that stuff, and so he ended up starting to kick the Ferrari and started smashing it and destroying it and all that stuff, and he was like very angry and mad, and he had a really huge right to be, and so then what happened was he then like kicked the Ferrari out of the garage, and so then what happened was that the Ferrari, went into the forest and crashed everything, and so anyways, then Cameron, said, that he was gonna take care of it and all that stuff, and so anyways, and so then from there, then after Ferris and Sloan left, then Anna and I, we went, we also went like where the broken garage, or not the broken garage, but like we found the broken car that was like in the forest and all that jazz, and so I was looking at it and I was like, oh my god, man, that's crazy. And so then Anna and I were there, and so then what happened was Cameron's dad came back and he was like all mad and all that stuff. He was like, oh my car! Oh my car! Oh my god! And so then what happened was that he didn't even know if Cameron broke it or if Ferris broke it or not, And so then he saw me and he was like, You destroyed my car! And then I'm like, oh no. And so then what happened was then Cameron's dad, started, chasing me, and so then unfortunately, Anna was like, Dexter, get in the car, and so then what happened was Cameron's dad started chasing me, and then there was like a car chase around Ferris's neighborhood, just as much as there was Jeannie getting picked up by the police department and all that stuff, and so then anyway, I was like Anna was like driving me, and and she was like going like 90 billion miles an hour, so we were going like really fast, and so then what happened was then Cameron's dad was gaining on us, and so then what happened was we ended up going off like a huge ramp, that was built for like skateboarders or something like that. And so anyways, then we went off a ramp, and so then what happened was we started going up in the air, and then we fall down, and so what happened was then like I started falling out of the car and going like, ah! And so, but then what happened was luckily there was a swimming pool that was on the ground, and so I ended up splashing into a swimming pool, and then Anna was in the swimming pool as well, and so anyways, then I fell into the swimming pool, and so unfortunately Cameron's dad ended up crashing and destroying another car and all that jazz, and so then, I started running, back to my house, and luckily, and that was basically just why I was dancing in the first place, because I was able to avoid Cameron's dad, but only bad part, though, is that he actually thought that I destroyed his 1960 Ferrari and all that stuff, and so unfortunately, and so then what happened was, he got into Cameron's house, and and he looked on his voicemail. Then Sloan went back to her house, and everything. I mean, it was just crazy, And then I also found out that Ferris was able to get back into his bed, without being caught and all that jazz, and I mean, it was just very, very crazy. And yeah. And then I also found out that Mr. Rooney got bit by the Rottweiler 30 times and all that stuff. And I don't think Mr. Rooney's not coming back to my high school anytime soon, And so yeah, and so that's kind of what happened, That is just, all the things that happened, in a nutshell. So there you have it, everybody. I mean, that was my day in a complete nutshell. I mean, with me avoiding Cameron's dad, and then the fact that I went to Chicago and went to other places, and then the fact that, the restaurant owner fell down through the window, and then, then the parade, and dancing with Anna, and then meeting Anna, and all that jazz, and then unfortunately, though, the only downside was there is the people in the black suits and the black neckties that were following me. I don't know if they're still following me now, but I'm just glad I'm just able to make it home just fine, from all the craziness that has just happened and all that jazz. And yeah, I mean, it's just like really, really, really crazy about like what's really going on, I mean, yeah, and man, I'm just so glad just to be home and all that stuff, and oh no, oh no.